I hope it's not a bigger whale. It seems that for every tiny, one-and-done horror game that comes out, it seems more and more are aiming for endless cliffhangers and lore. To the degree a lot obviously have no long-term plan, and if you are invested, there's a lot that'll be unanswered or outright forgotten. Then some higher budget ones feel like such a mess of hands and ideas, it makes you wonder what the hell the original idea even looked like, though you might have your suspicions. So while my Sue Prep hours are being unpleasantly interrupted by coming back to one of those games, I started thinking about Yames. Yames has been active for years now, making all kinds of horror games, usually cheap but often free. I found a lot of them to be extremely memorable, and even if I didn't like some that much, it still wouldn't take that much of my time and would still have some memorable imagery. So while this was one I played years ago, a few months back it came out on Steam, so it seemed like a good time to talk about Water Womb World. Aqua Catholicism. Explore man's original sin under the sea. What more could you ask for? Now, the game should only take you about 20 to 30 minutes, and it's free. So you could just go play it if you want and come back, leave a nice review if you liked it, but I still think about it often enough that I thought it was worth showcasing here, because it shows just how much intrigue and setting you can pull off in less than a half hour, where there are games I've spent a good chunk of change on that a week later, I can barely remember. So let's head to Gaspar's Zone and see if God is really on the bottom of the seafloor.
Welcome to Water Room World. After 300,000 years in development, hopefully it will have been worth the wait.
You play as a Christian scientist who has grown disillusioned with church organizations, because his research has led him to believe the ultimate truths are based on hard material fact. A lot that's dismissed as an allegory or a metaphor to make you live a good life has led to throwing out too much of the literal interpretation of the text. So he set off to a remote ocean region called Gaspar's Zone. He's had an underwater lab prepared to find more proof and research his theory. All he has to do is go out on the seafloor, sift through soil, and catch some fish before his air runs out. It's kind of like panning for gold, but with a slight chance you get kicked into a higher plane of existence. And no, there's nothing that jumps out and gets you either. It's not that kind of game. The gameplay is extremely simple to learn, and there's not that much to master. Everything is controlled with your mouse down to your movement. You manually click arrows to move your character across the seafloor. It is a fairly small grid, so it's not like you could wander off into the ocean and plummet into the abyss. Plus the scientist threw some lights down compared to a pure black grid. The main challenge is just catching the fish, which are pretty slow, but some are slightly faster or take you by surprise that something's there. So you might whiff a net and then need to move a space or so over to catch the thing. And if you do run low on nets, or air somehow, you just move to the most southbound location and you could go back to your lab and restock. This is also where you can research your findings and check yourself out in the mirror. Looking good. Other than that, it's just pilfering through sand, clicking the button and then moving on to the next space if you don't find anything. What I find interesting is just how laser focused this all is. Just inside this loop it could have added all kinds of things to stretch the game out. There's nothing like junk items to find, or irrelevant fish. I mean, really, there's not that much to catch or dig up, but it's all relevant. Even something like your movement being so restricted ends up being a benefit, because if this was a 3D game, where you would have to dig would be a lot more telegraphed if you didn't want it to be frustrating. I guess you could add small piles of rocks or markers you beeline to, or you could scatter some around with more false positives, but that would still lend itself better to a game where there are lots of things you want to collect. A big, open ocean compared to a small slice of the holy seafloor, where it makes sense to pick a random spot and dig on faith. I find something weirdly nostalgic about this interface. It's like a twisted version of one of those educational games from the 90s. Come on everybody, come play Reader Rabbit's Dogmatic Crisis. Weirdly, even though the graphics are kept low fidelity, there's dithering with that slight warbling effect. It might be the sound design causing it above all else, because it is made to sound compressed and low quality like you'd expect, but it's perfectly fine playing the same sound effect over and over on top of itself. Like, just for the act of moving through the water, a modern sound designer would add at least 3 or so sound effects. Here, you get the same splish splash. It also sounds distant and muted for that underwater effect, but back in the lab, sound effects are a lot more crunchy. Super simple contrast, but it's there. So when certain sound effects come across like a mix of both, it's pretty weird. The music is mostly very pleasant, gentle ambient noise that easily blends into the background. You typically focus in on the typing sound above all else, and it is a neat simple effect when it speeds up for frantic thoughts or speaking, or really slows down for deliberation. Still, diving in more means talking about the story, so spoilers from here on out. While there's not a ton to find in the seafloor, everything you do raises a lot of questions, like the post-lapsarian Adamite skull. I figured Adamite just meant a child or descendant of Adam, Post-Lapsarian, I had no clue. I looked it up and it just means the time period after mankind has fallen into sin, so the more you know. That would still be a wide time period, being just about everyone, but lab analysis shows some more details. The person was born about 10 generations after when the scientist thinks the fall was, and lived around 1,000 years. It lived an aquatic lifestyle, lining up with his aqua Edenic studies. This ties into a different object he found, another diving mask. Someone else has figured out the truth, and lab analysis shows it was from the 20th century and covered in Christograms and biblical inscriptions. Right from the opening, the scientist was disillusioned with the church, but now we get more insight into some paranoia. He thinks whoever owned this mask was sent by the church, and there are elements of the papal conclave in the know. It's not just misinterpretation, the powers that be are hiding the truth. So we've now been fed a few possibilities. There's a grand conspiracy to hide that life came from the ocean in a way described directly somewhere in the Old Testament. Or some non-canonized books hold the secret, and the church is trying to get rid of anyone who discovers it. Or someone else just happened to come to the same conclusion earlier. Or maybe both are true and happened independently, but either way, there's no other sign of the old researcher. As for the fish, it's over 10,000 years old, feeds off coral, and has bones stronger than modern metamaterials. This seemingly confirms his theory that Gaspar's zone was or is near the Garden of Eden, but scientifically nothing explains how the fish could possibly be that old. Well, shortly after this, a strange noise leads him back outside, and he is given some explanation. Wow, it's an angel! Just how I always imagined it. The sons of Adam left the tree of life for the fruit of knowledge. Your path is contrary. You can still leave and die as a man, or join God in full flesh. Words will fail you in the womb of God. He's pretty adamant about this. The scientist kind of blows it off. He's more amazed the description of it matches his research, how amazing it was to witness, but I need to go out there and find more evidence. It looks like there might be a few contrary paths happening here. He's a faithful man who wants to find the truth of God, and sure, faith without works is dead. But he barely takes a second to ponder the words of what an actual fucking angel said to him. Sure, it's a squid angel, but he was also expecting a squid angel. So he didn't need extra convincing in a way like, hey, I am a divine messenger, even if this isn't the form you expected. Having been in a historical research field once, this is a lot more real than you might think. Typically when it comes to sourcing, something written down usually has a huge inherent advantage over oral tradition. An annoying and great example is the missing Roanoke colony that every 5 years or so a news cycle will say is finally solved. Where the local Croatan tribe told European visitors about a century later, yeah, they came with us. It's why we have some different eye colors, and didn't they leave a note saying where they were going? But it still gets many colorful theories today. The advantage of written finds is usually there's other archaeological evidence around it. Hearing a story, especially one passed down, typically means a lot more legwork. Except here, the angel is the find. If he actually examined what it said, he could have made a solid hypothesis based on what he found already, especially when it's a warning, one the angel's begging for him to listen to. But this is just one interpretation to where he could be caught up in the fever of discovering God to the point he's blowing off a messenger. Then again, shouldn't he feel like he already does know God and doesn't need physical proof, and that would be more scientific? Or it could be something down here is already affecting him. Either way, the only thing still in the sand at Rapture's doorstep is some of the red coral that fish was feeding on. You also get to snag 2 more weird fish. But it might truly be the latter days because the scientist is now feeling unwell, like all his knowledge is starting to slip away. When he first came down here, he mourned feeling separated from God, and now it feels like he can't focus as he's learning all the answers. The new eyeless fish was born in the Jurassic period. It's near motionless, also feeds off coral, but has proto-human proteins. It not only lacks eyes, it can't sense the difference between light and dark at all, which could mean something like temperature, but the scientist's language is getting a little more simple. The other fish may be the oldest object ever recorded. It's even more made up of coral, so what is the coral? Well, his mind is too far gone to fully read the answers. It can create consciousness and is the womb of God. It turns out when you find the ultimate answer, you don't need to find any more answers. Still, he could always poke around outside for more. No need for air or much of anything else, just feeding on coral. That's all she wrote. So, let's go over a few things. It did deliver on finding God at the bottom of the ocean, but there is still a lot of irony here. Our character starts off complaining about not taking holy text literally, an angel says what will happen, and he tries to interpret it. For only a second or so, but he doesn't take it at face value. You can have knowledge or eternal life because God is some kind of immortal coral network, or a coral being that can absorb forms into it. It's a dangerous thing to know because knowing it destroys knowing. Did he get coral exposure by handling fish? Were there microparticles in the water? Does just being near it send your brain down from F1 to NASCAR? I guess either way, to err is to be human, and perfect eternal life is being an unthinking mass. It's neat how many little bits are snuck in there that aren't pointed out, that do hint of more of the direct origins. It's the Garden of Eden where all life came from, no one knows the difference between good and evil. Here's a fish that cannot tell the difference between light and dark. How about communion or sacrament, eating the actual body of God hoping to live with him forever? With each bite, your hands become more fin-like, so do you immediately join God, or do you become a fish for a while, drifting until you're barely moving, feeding on coral, and then eventually you go back and join the mass? The angel never said when you would become full flesh, only that it would happen if you stayed down here. It could be the previous researcher didn't disappear at all and you already caught them, or the ending is you just about to join them. It leaves a lot to chew on and possible expansion, like how do angels work in this setting? Were there other people in the know? Are there other bits you could pull out from an old text to make it fit in the setting? It's a one and done that leaves you wanting more, rather than wishing it was over. What's interesting about Yames is that this game easily could have had jump scares. There could have been a monster or something else that pops out with a screamer, which he has done screamers before. Like, it's fine the angel's a squid, I just didn't expect that. But when you look at him, he's not threatening really. He's pretty casual, and most of Yames' games are like this. You undergo a horrible transforming or witness one, or maybe help out with one, but they all happen in this almost casual, matter-of-fact way. You're the one pushing the horror and strange events along, and there's nothing to run away from except turning the game off, I guess, which works great in these short games. Here you get to witness a scientist, a man all about learning and asking questions, want to find the ultimate knowledge. It ends up being completely self-destructive. He joins a perfect immortal form, but it's a stagnant one. The dude made it to the ultimate garden, but there's nothing to eat there. Nothing but coral. It does suck that sometimes the chase feels better than the reward. But I guess that's life, and it's worth living. So that's Water Womb World. Cool little game. You'd be about halfway through if you played it by now. But if you wanted a longer Yames game with more mechanics, I could recommend Growing My Grandpa, where you help a sad little girl nurture and teach a grandpa-like entity. Millions have played or watched the Yames catalog, and there are still more being made. There is a Patreon if you want to get in on that and have early looks at some projects. I'll link it below. And if you know more of these very short but interesting games, please share them. Funnily enough, Yames is more of a heavy hitter in the space, but there's a ton more out there that's easy to miss. It might not be good to cover games this small all the time, but every so often, maybe with a collection of other ones, maybe. Anyways, next time we'll dive into a much more mechanically rich game. Just not rich in ultimate knowledge. I'm not capable of holding ultimate knowledge. I hear Death Note music when I lose my car keys. Will there be other cryo-interactive adventures? Unfortunately for me, it is inevitable. They had their hands in so many adventure games, but some were pretty good. Was I always the kind of player to try and finish games in the hardest setting? Not really. A lot of games you've seen me do that in I've played a lot before, or had difficulty settings that weren't just making enemies bullet sponges and putting out more damage. That can work in some games, but usually just ends up being tedious. I am applying as a stable helper during polo season. Any advice? I instinctively read that as poo season, so get nice boots and also accept they'll be gone soon. Don't walk too close to stalls you're not looking at, horses are like wasps and will get you. And horses are good teachers, but their lessons are usually permanent, so be extremely careful at all times. What IP would I like to see in a different genre? I'd like a Halo Tactics game, one of those mercenary band ones. What else? Elder Scrolls 4X game? Oh, duh, an Alien game, but you're Weyland-Yutani and it's basically Evil Genius. I'm sure nothing would ever escape.
And there shall be no other gods before me.
What about Masters?